სამარგურჩიანი, Ilia სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის სამართლის სკოლის ასოცირებული პროფესორი და ასევე East-West Management ინსტიტუტის პროგრამის კანონის უზენაესობა საქართველოში მიერ დაფინანსებული ადამიანის უფლებათა მიმართულების ხელმძღვანელი. ეს არის სხვათა შორის ამ პოზიციაში ჩემი პირველი ღონისძიება და მაქვს პატივი, რომ ეს ღონისძიება ჩვენ შესანიშნავ სტუმართან ერთად Ulrike Schultzთან ერთად ჩავატარო, რომლის საქართველოში ჩამოგზავნებაც უზრუნველყო Heinrich Boells ფონდმა სამხრეთ კავკასიაში. Heinrich Boells ფონდს ამ დღეებში დაწყებული 2 მარტს და სრულდება სწორედ ამ ღონისძიებით ჰქონდა ძალიან საინტერესო საერთაშორისო ვორქშოპი გენდერთან დაკავშირებით, რომელსაც ერქვა ქალები საჯარო სივრცეებში, როდესაც პერსონალური ხდება პოლიტიკური. მე მქონდა პატივი, რომ ამ კონფერენციასაც დავსწრებოდი და იქაც მომესმინა ქალბატონი Ulrike Schultzის შესანიშნავი გამოსვლისთვის და ამ დარბაზში არიან სხვადასხვა ქვეყნებიდან ჩამოსული სტუმრები, რომლებიც არიან გენდერის სპეციალისტები და მე ღრმად ვარ დარწმუნებული, რომ დღეს არა მხოლოდ ჩვენი უნივერსიტეტის სტუდენტებს, არამედ სხვა წარმომადგენლებსაც გვექნება მართლაც შესანიშნავი შესაძლებლობა, რომ ვისაუბროთ ძალიან მნიშვნელოვან საკითხზე, რომელზეც სხვათა შორის მე არ მახსოვს, რომ ამ უნივერსიტეტში ოდესმე ვინმეს ასე საჯარო ღონისძიებაზე ესაუბროს. ეს გახლავთ სექსიზმი და გენდერული სტერეოტიპები კანონმდებლობაში და სამართალწარმოებაში. თვითონ სამართლის სკოლაში გენდერის საკითხი სულ ახლახან გახდა აქტუალური და იმედი მაქვს დღევანდელი ჩვენი ლექცია იქნება კარგი ინსპირაცია, რომ ახალი პროგრამები წამოვიწყოთ და ახალი ინიციატივები გაგუჩნდეს და იმედი მაქვს, რომ ჩვენი სტუდენტები, რომლებიც დღეს ამ ლექციას ესწრებიან, მონაწილეობას მიიღებენ ამაში. ორივე სიტყვა მინდა ვთქვა ქალბატონი Ulrike Schultzის შესახებ, ის გახლავთ, ესე იგი, იურისტი და უფროსი მეცნიერი, ჰაგენის დისტანციური სწავლების უნივერსიტეტში მუშაობს ამჟამად. იგი იკვლევს გენდერს და კარიერას გერმანიის იუდეულ აკადემიაში. ის მუშაობს როგორც კანონმდებლობაზე, ასევე კანონმდებლობაში გენდერის როლზე, ასევე იურიდიულ პროფესიაშიც. და ბევრი რომ არ გავაგრძელო, მე კი წავიკითხე მისი რამდენიმე სტატია და ძალიან დიდი შთაბეჭდილების ქვეშ ვარ, მაგრამ გუშინაც მქონდა ის შეგრძნება, რომ საკმარისი დრო არ გქონდა, რომ ყველაფერი გაგვიგო მისგან და იმედი მაქვს ამის კომპენსაციასაც შევძლებთ და ახლა უმჯობესია, რომ მას დავუთმო ეს დრო. ჩვენ გვაქვს 45 წუთი ლექციისთვის და შემდეგ უკვე გაგრძელდება ლექცია, გაგრძელდება დისკუსიით და ყველა შეგეძლებათ, რომ გასვათ კითხვები და გააკეთოთ კომენტარები. დიდი მადლობა. გთხოვთ.
I like to lecture standing up because then I have a better context to you. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be able to tell you something of the research I've done in the past 15 years. The research was focused on women in the legal profession. That was,
I think you should hold closer to the microphone or get that.
Oh, yeah, that's better. Then I can move. Perfect technology. So I get, that's good. So I've worked on practicing lawyers. I've worked on women in the judiciary, the prosecutors and judges. And of course it always meant you have to see the men's side too. And my recent project is about gender and careers in the legal academy, because we have so few women law professors in Germany. This last is not finished. So today I'm going to talk about sexism in law and the impact of gender stereotypes in legal proceedings. A year ago I was asked to write an article about sexism. And sexism in law is rather a subject which is dealt with by criminologists. And I'm not a criminologist. I'm doing gender law, and I'm doing European law and some other things. But still, I found it tempting to deal with that. And of course, I have some knowledge of criminology. And so I tried to bring together my experience from my research project and this sexism issue. I need those hands. First, I checked what are precisely the definitions for sexism. And the classical definition is sexism is prejudice or discrimination based on stereotyping, typically against women, on the basis of sex. And to distinguish this kind of sexism from other kinds of sexism towards other persons, this dictionary distinguished them from that gender discrimination and said this is against identity-based orientation, stereotyping like third gender or queer. I would not really distinguish this here, but obviously I'm more talking about discrimination and stereotyping against women, but here there will also be something against men. And about third gender or queer, I have not included examples, but you can ask me questions afterwards. And so the question is, if we want to deal with this, gender stereotypes, where do they come from? Gender stereotypes, and the question, why do we deal with the question of sexism in law and the impact of gender stereotypes? If we have gender stereotypes, the question is, do people are treated equally well by the law, and do we get in legal proceedings just judgments? So these are also questions of justice. So, and to start with, gender stereotypes, where do they come from? And I've tried to think a little about the gender stereotypes we have in Germany, and roots, of course, are in history, in religion, in culture, and the economic situation. And then there's always the question of biology, and that's the tricky question. Well, origin of gender stereotypes in Germany. If I think back, the classical period of German literature implanted classical images in our head. Every German school child has to learn Schiller's poem of The Bell. That was written 1799. Und drinnen waltet die züchtige Hausfrau, die Mutter der Kinder. I can still recite it. It's about women's role, that it is domestic, indefatigable, hard-working housewife, and the man is in the public sphere, hunting, creating, and earning. So this is creating the breadwinner housewife model. In the Biedermeier period, in the 19th century, and I can show you the picture, is nice and cozy. This is a famous painter of the Biedermeier, Germany. They added a halo of idyllic domesticity. Then time moved towards the German Empire, yes, this Kaiserreich, and there the middle-class bourgeois orientation in German society was strengthened. Middle class was also the wife being at home, educating the children well, and the man earning serious money. We had some time, we had the First World War, and the Weimar Republic, and then the Nazi period. That again added a flavor to it. It added the glorification of the mother as the childbearer, breeding heroes, and the heart and soul of the family. And after the war, amazingly enough, we had to recreate the new German Republic, but we kept a conservative family model. We had the dear mother image of the housewife as a social status symbol. Of course, since we've had many other stereotypical things, stereotypes, but these stereotypes are more diverse, and these classical old stereotypes have informed our law, the law we had and the law we had to change to come to the situation we have today. And I will show and tell you that we still have some of the old stereotypes in law, and it's so difficult to get rid of them. So, talking about gender stereotypes, which gender stereotypes come to your minds spontaneously? Or, if that's a little indecent to ask that, which gender stereotypes does a man or woman in the street have? Think about it. Note free. Well, this is a question I ask judges at further education. I've done gender trainings with judges, which is a little difficult to do, but I also do communications trainings, and in communications training I can easily ask them about stereotypes. And I've put together some stereotypes for female and male I've got in these trainings. Female, dear mother, raven mother, that's the German image of raven mother, the bad mother who goes out and doesn't look after the children well. The bitch, beautiful, ugly, fat woman. The fat woman is something nasty we had in rape cases. An ugly fat woman who's raped, she won't be happy that she's been raped. Well, this is a little cynical. Yeah, but we've had cases like that. It's some time ago, but still. Well, so women, aren't they soft, good, emotional, lenient, illogical, caring, talkative, sensitive, empathetic, helpful, neat? What's a helpful? Fearful. The man, contradictory image. Great guy, successful man, fast climber. What's a loser? The alpha man. Strong, brave, tough, authoritarian, dominant, logical, proud, intelligent, objective, assertive, and more. This is a list of adjectives I've put together after one training. This is it, only the look. So, is this the ideal man all these adjectives bring to our eyes? Or what about this one? Mother's darling. Or what about this one? And the ideal woman. Is this the ideal woman? Like the Florentine virgin, that was the woman who was raped so seriously over 15 years in the summer in Austria. Or this picture, or oh, she's a little hesitantly climbing, isn't she? Oh, yeah, another image. So, stereotypes, these different stereotypes refer to differences between men and women. But what about these stereotypes? Are they all socially constructed? Is there some biology in it? Oh, what about the hormones? And male aggression and female peacefulness? And what about male and female intelligence? We've quite a lot of research in that field. And is it true that girls have better marks than boys at school or at university? What is about the spatial vision differences? Do women really talk more than men? And do boys and girls prefer different toys? I refer here to very popular notions of differences. This is just to provoke you a little and to give you something to think about. But you can ask me afterwards what I found out about these stereotypes. So, due to all these stereotypes, now the consequence for women is that women are considered to be more vulnerable, in need of protection, less reliable, maybe due to family breaks, performing less well. And women are due to male dominance subjected to physical, economic, and psychological violence. And of course, this can't be. And all these stereotypes, of course, have found a way into law. And at first glance, you would think of family law and of criminal law, but you can find them everywhere, also in tax law, property law, in succession law, administrative law, social and labor law. I give you here some examples of gender stereotypes in law. And what is written in grey, that's something I've talked about yesterday a little, that is history. That is no longer valid, but to show you what has been there and what in other countries still may be there. Family. We never, I must confess, have the clause, the wife owes obedient to her husband. But when our civil code was discussed, the family law section, men demanded to get that rule. And well, in the end it was avoided, but still, it's only 100 years ago, or 160 years ago, our civil code came in force on the 1st of January 1900. And so imagine we'd have that in the code. And even if it's not in the code, it may be in the backs of the minds. In the back of the minds. But we had in the family law that the husband had the full custody over children, women no custody. The husband had uninfringed rights over wife's assets. The breadwinner, housewife model of family till, until 1978, as I've said yesterday. And in labor law, we had the situation that also till well into the 50s, the husband could terminate the wife's work contract. And we had in labor law many rules to protect women. All this, with all these stereotypes in mind, the soft woman was to be protected because her rule is for procreation and that shouldn't be endangered. So we had rules that women are forbidden to do labor at night. As nurses, yes, but otherwise not. And these jobs were well paid. It was only done away in '92 in Germany. They couldn't perform heavy bodily work, and heavy bodily work was also to sit on a crane and using that little stick. But women had the big sewing machine. So that's history. Of course, we have still women's protection rules, maternal leave, breaks for breastfeeding, which women need, that is necessary, but of course that distinguishes them from men, and that's something which some employers find it very difficult to have. That's nothing new, I see. And then I tell you, we still have, and I want to give you an example here, a very clear gender stereotype hidden in our law in Germany. And we needed quite some time to discover it and to come with grips with it, and we haven't been able to solve it up to today. And this stereotypical notion of a woman that she should be a housewife works like this. In tax law, we have since the mid-50s, and that was a demand by our Federal Constitutional Court, a rule that families, that married couples, not necessarily families with children, married couples, should have tax benefits. And so we have a splitting rule. For example, if the man earns 80,000, the woman 20,000, you put it together, 100,000, and each pays taxes on 50,000. And to pay taxes on 50,000 is less than to pay taxes on 80,000. So this is a gain. And in social law, we have the rule with couples, if there is one person who doesn't earn, I do a gender neutral now, but in 90% or more, it's the woman. They have a derived health insurance. They don't have to pay for that health insurance. And they have a derived pension. If the man dies, they get a pension without having paid anything for it. And so, if you take these assets together, you have a threshold. You have you have to earn beyond that threshold, that it is rewarding to earn money. So that is clearly an impediment for women to go out on the labor market. And this is also backed up by a rule on mini-jobs. In Germany, you can have mini-jobs up to some amount of money, 400 euro, something like that. I'm always bad at remembering figures, and it changes all the time. And in these cases, the employer pays the taxes and social security, and these are not counted against that model. So this has to be added to that threshold. And that's incredible, that in such a developed society as we are, we still have this gender stereotype so hidden in the law. But the problem is, even the left-wing parties do not have a solution how to get rid of that, because so many people in Germany have built their family model relying on this. This is something we work at, but just to give you an idea what it means to have gender stereotypes in law. And the consequences, of course, in labor, all these consequences is that we have unequal pay in the labor market, women are more threatened by unemployment, and you know the story about the different levels of employment, that we have this horizontal stratification, that women have their special corners and men their turfs, and the vertical stratification with the glass ceiling. Well, that was about civil law, mainly. Coming to criminal law. Criminal law, amazingly, gives a positive discrimination for women, because there are crimes which describe male behavior, but more important is that many crimes are not committed by women or only by a minor percentage of women. Well, a male crime that was abolished in Germany in 71, homosexuality. Till 71 we also had adultery. It was for both sexes. In some countries we only have it for women. Homosexuality was only for men, not for women. Abortion is a gendered crime. And as I said, if you have a look at the criminal statistics, all the crime connected with violence is committed by men. So there in the code is something described which is classically connected with male behavior. The only crime which has a majority of female offenders, but which doesn't come to courts very often, is neglect of minors. That's, I think women have a 56% share with that crime. They have a comparably higher percentage of theft and fraud. That means like, let's say 25%, something like that. Maybe due to women's overall less good financial situation. I present you many question marks. All in all, the proportion of female offenders for total criminal offenses is between 4 and 25% worldwide. In your country, it's very low. This I know from international statistics. In Germany, we have this 25 now, and it has risen in recent years. But my own sample is, I go to court regularly, about 4 or 5 times per year, watching cases, criminal law and labor law. And in criminal court, I've seen about 400 cases since 1980. And I only have met 2 women who appeared before court. So they commit many petty crimes, meaning that these are dealt with in written proceedings and are not dealt with in an open court session. And maybe we'll have a look at this first. In prison, the percentage of women is only 2 to 9%. This is also from international statistics. In Germany, it's about 5%. In your country, again, less. The question is, do they commit the less serious crimes are not the question. This really is a statement. But of course, you could only think, do they get more lenient sentences due to a better social prognosis? Also attached maybe to stereotyping again. So the question, are women less delinquent, more law-abiding, more virtuous? This is the idea we fancied in the 80s, that women are the better people, men have won all the wars around the world. And is it due to biological factors, or to an ascribed gender character, or different socialization, or the lived gender role as caregiver? Anyway, we have to say, obviously, the criminal code is male law produced by a male legislator. The code was produced in 1878. And of course, many things have changed. And as I've shown you with the international criminal statistics, what I tell you is not much different in other countries. A colleague of mine has painted a nice picture. This is the legal subject. And this one says, oh, wonderful, the legal subject. Without sex, or without gender, both. No preferences, no assets, no particular bodily possibilities or assets. Wonderful. So this is the neutral male subject, the neutral subject in criminal law. But of course, the question is: are women treated differently due to gender stereotypes by police, prosecution, and judges, which will take me to the proceedings in a minute. But let me first also come back to that question. Why do we have that rise in numbers of female offenders in Germany? I was very astonished to see that. For many years it was 15, 16, 17%, and suddenly it has risen. Question: is it due to the process of emancipation? We of course then have to compare in which crimes women are found more often in the statistics now. Are getting women more violent? We have some evidence that more women these days in Germany are involved in violent attacks due to modern role models, the tough girl, or to pressure from outside pressure, I don't know. Or do we have the situation that due to changing gender roles and the way women are perceived in modern society, women now are more often investigated by police because we no longer have that stereotype that all women are virtuous. In former times, sometimes they didn't believe that a woman could have done that. There's a very famous case in American criminal history about Lizzie Borden. Lizzie Borden had killed her parents with an axe. And nobody could believe that in 1800 something, 70-something, I think, a woman could do something like that. And so they didn't punish her. It couldn't be that she had done it. And maybe we've done away with this stereotype now, and that women are now more often invested by police, accused by prosecution. Do women get less pardon? Or is it just that we have more light in the dark field, as criminologists say? So, let me move on to legal proceedings. Stereotypes in legal proceedings. Who uses which stereotypes? Now, this is mainly dealing with judges now. And you may know that in all our countries, the number of female judges has risen considerably. I said yesterday, when I started to study in Munich in '66, we were 7% of women in the law faculty, and now overall in Germany we have like 56% of women in legal faculty studying law, and in the judiciary in Germany we have 46% of female judges, a little more prosecutors, and if we regard the work share, that's something very important. Many women in Germany work part-time, and so regarding the work share, the number is less. So in the work share, we have a 40% share of female labor law courts. This refers now to the research project on gender and judging I've done. In what way does gender matter in judging? Do women judge differently? Do men judge differently? What difference does it make if you've had a really male profession, just men practicing? Still in 1970, we only had 2% of female judges. 2%, that's close to nothing. And suddenly we have this enormous number of women coming in. And having in mind all what I've said about gender perceptions, but also about gendered roles performed in society, does this matter? Well, we started with our work on women's roles in professions in the 80s. And in the 80s it was modern to think about difference theory. So our research question was, do women change the profession, or does the profession change women? I can't tell you details of all that here, because I have to focus on my question here, but we can talk a little more about it later. So here the question is, do women in the judiciary make a difference? What is happening there? And maybe do they judge better? Wouldn't that be wonderful to improve the judicial system? Well, do judges have stereotypes? Everybody has stereotypes, and of course judges have stereotypes two. I showed you the list of stereotypes. Of course, I didn't ask the judges to give their own. I would have found that appalling. But talking about other people's stereotypes, of course, you show that basically you have them in your head too. In the 80s, in sociology of law, we have discussed about preconceived opinions, that in the judiciary, people come with a fixed mind, and we have to break it open, because with a preconceived opinion, you of course can't be just. Then you are fixed on something which has nothing to do with the case you have to deal with. And I cite from my research from essays or pieces or books other colleagues have written. One colleague has written an article with the title, "The Myth of the Color and Gender-Blind Judge." Jurists want to be objective. That's the essence of what they do, objectivity. But well, they are not, and so she said the myth. She's from the United States, and in the United States and in all the Anglo-American world, it's much easier to talk about bias in the judiciary, and in particular about gender bias, than in civil law countries. Because in civil law countries, we say we have the codes, we have the law, it acts, and this is applied in a technical procedure, and we are objective. So if I try to discuss these questions with German judges, they think I'm a little crazy. In the Anglo-American world, it's quite natural to discuss it. Whenever a new judge is elected to the Supreme Court in the United States, there will be long newspaper articles discussing the background, what the person has written before, etc., etc. And another one has written that males and females develop different worldviews and see themselves differentially connected to society, which means they have different life experiences, yes, different worldviews. And of course that matters when you apply law, also when you want to make law. But making law, you have a parliament with a diversity of opinions and minds, and they quarrel and they argue. But in courts you have one judge, or maybe two judges, or three judges. And so that matters so much more. So what else matters for the individual person? Education, the background. In the 70s we have the trias, race, class, race, class, gender. So now we say ethnicity, social stratum, and gender, yes. And then the life circumstances matter. The financial situation, of course. We've had decisions by our Supreme Tax Court, and you could clearly show that there was a judge who was a little envious, so his judgment was informed, but I earn so much less than that person who's done this and that. The family status matters. Am I married? Do I have children or not? Of course that frames my mind, and political views. So, and how far can these different experiences come into the judgment? So the question again, do women make a difference? What would speak against the difference? Of course we have an assimilation in legal education and training to the neutralized image of the judge. This is the ideal of universalism. Men and women have an equal qualification, and it's geared to being objective. In Germany, we need between 7 and 10 years to become a professional, a legal professional. And by times it was 10 years. And that is a very intensive molding process, which of course leaves traces in it. But still, of course, differences remain. But on the other hand, yes, your primary identity is that as a professional. Having worked all my life at a university, I still feel very much a jurist. Everybody who's gone through the training in Germany is a jurist, and that identity stays till you die. So, The point is that is from management literature, individuals are more likely to be transformed by institutions than vice versa. This is about the question, do women change the profession? We would have to go deeper into that, but here the point is, in what way do the gender stereotypes work in this particular field? So, difference. Do women judge differently or even better? Here I have two citations from the Anglo-American world. When the judge Sonia Sotomayor, that was the last judge which had been nominated by Obama. Another new one has to be nominated, but they're quarreling, does Obama do it or the next president? And she herself, she was the first Latina to be nominated, said, I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life. Oh. And Brenda Hale, she is the first and so far only female judge at the new Supreme Court in the UK, before it was the House of Lords, the last instance in the UK. She said the incorporation of difference on the bench, and she herself, subtly changes and ultimately improves the judicial product. Okay, so women make a difference, that's something we can confer from that, and then I say, and men make a difference too, even if they have been the ones who pass sentences or through the time. Of course, you can see this judgment under different aspects. I have analyzed judgments from the 50s and 80s from our highest federal court, and there are some terrible judgments. Yesterday I've mentioned that about men as head of the family, and the terrible decisions on procuration. I can tell you the story later. So, in what way then do the gender stereotypes matter, and in what way do women may differ in the way they decide? I've always said I've gone around like someone who tries to catch butterflies, to catch evidence. Is there something? And our book on gender and judging is as big as this. It has almost 600 pages, and there's many literature around. And I just give you the top of everything here. The first thing we discovered that we could trace differences between men and women in deciding on alimony cases. Amazingly, what would you think? A woman comes to the family court, wants alimony. Is she better off with a male judge or with a female judge? With a male judge, not with a female judge. The female judge is a working woman, and she thinks, oh, why does she want to live on her man? She should try and make her own man. Well, this is, you know, a little, making it adding a little to it, but that was the essence of these cases. And of course you also have something there, men like women and women like men. So there is this cross-gender sympathy and empathy which works. Also in criminal cases where I come to that. In custody cases, however, women had more empathy with their sisters. In custody cases, it was better that women try to help the women at court. We have a very extended research on the family judiciary in France, a very new one that has been done in comparison with French Canada, and they have discovered that the female judges in the proceedings also showed a more caring attitude. This is also about communication, and we'll come back to that a little later. And amazing also that women judges in France ranked their work in family courts higher than their male colleagues. The male colleagues said, I have to do that work when I want to have a career in the law courts. And the women said, we love this work, it's wonderful. Of course, there was someone who said it too, but still. And I have an opposite case to which I come in a minute. Well, in labor law, there is an extended research in the United States about sex discrimination, about gender stereotypes in sex discrimination, sexual and racial harassment cases. And they have discovered a lot, they have described in the literature, gendered effects. That men decided differently from women. Of course, you can never rely on a particular judge. All these are individuals, and you can't say, ha, a man, you will decide like that. No, but there is something to it, and that's the point we have to deal with. And I found something very interesting. In these sex discrimination, sexual and racial harassment cases, they first started with racial harassment because all these race cases are very important in the United States, that there was a panel effect. That if you had a panel of several judges, one woman sitting with two men, or two women sitting with one woman sitting with two men, the men would orient their judgment towards the woman, obviously thinking she is the expert in these cases, and the same if there was a black judge and white judges, the same pattern. And they also discovered that women judges wrote the judgment more in a pro-woman fashion, with more empathy in the words. We also have cases in administrative law. I just cite one here. This is about asylum law in several countries, USA, Germany, and I cite again Brenda Hill from the UK. The question was, can women threatened by genital mutilation get asylum? Asylum is for political refugees. And genital mutilation, can we subsume these women under, well, this heading? And then more women than men opened the field up, and Brenda Hale for the UK has brought about the decision that in the UK a woman can get asylum if she is threatened by genital mutilation. Social law, a very fun case. When we did our research on careers in the judiciary, that was about, the project was called Women in Leading Positions in the Judiciary in North Rhine-Westphalia, my favorite state, the biggest favorite state in Germany. And of course, the title was this title because there are so few women in leading positions last year. And we went around to all kinds of courts and asked judges about their careers, and in the end I also asked, have you discovered any difference in decision making with the family courts? On that about custody and alimony. They all said, oh, yeah, so we have discovered the family law judges. Now, at the state social court, second instance, we have interviewed several judges, and when they got the question, they all said, oh yes, when we have to decide if the Viagra should be paid by the health insurance, the women were definitely of a different mind than the men. So there we really had to quarrel and find a majority vote.
Is it really covered by insurance?
That is really true, that story. Yeah, it is, yes. Yeah. Under special circumstances, it is, isn't that nice? Yeah, and that
makes perfect sense.
And then the story was on, and then the men wanted to have so and so many per month. They had to decide how many can we give them per month. Okay, let's move on to criminal law. Criminal law, of course, opens a broad gateway for sexist arguments as perpetrators, the wrongdoers. But also witnesses and victims have their personality displayed and questioned at court. And how they act and what they do is evaluated. So there are a lot of stereotyping and sexist arguments can come in. The question always was, are women more lenient than men as criminal judges because women are so soft and gentle, etc. How does it work? And here we have mixed evidence. I have one very interesting evidence. I've done one further training over many years with two psychologists, and we have given the judges a fake file. They had to decide on the file, and it always proved that the women passed more lenient sentences than the judges, amazingly enough. We have evidence from many countries that obviously women tend to be harsher in cases of violence against women and rape. But then we got evidence from Israel, and there women decided, and there was solid evidence, women passed more lenient sentences in these cases, which was difficult to understand. And then the colleague said, there is a counter effect. You can explain it in that way, that women suspected that everybody would think that they would pass a harsh sentence, and they wanted to counterbalance that impression to make the sentence keep, because otherwise it may be taken to the next instance. And in criminal law, and this is interesting too, in Germany we had an extended research on that in 1990. Women judges ranked their work in criminal courts lower than their male colleagues. It's dirty hands sentencing people. For men it was different. Okay, so here's some results from research in criminal cases in the 1980s and 90s. At that time, it proved that women at court could get a bonus if conforming to stereotypical gender role. Being nice, subservient, gentle helpers. Oh, the sweet-eyed, blonde young woman, she can't have really committed a serious crime. Rule breakers were in danger of a less sympathetic treatment, stiffer sentences. Trying to play the tough role. This was the 80s and 90s. I don't know how the situation has changed now. We don't have fresh research on that, because think of the 50%, almost 50% of female judges and prosecutors we have now, and also if we have a look at the prosecution, 30% of women in the police meanwhile. Women at the time also experienced that criminal proceedings were not only an investigation into their conduct, but also an evaluation of expectations regarding their role as women. You as a woman, why have you done that? And could that be expected from a woman? All this has not only happened in criminal law, criminal court. I remember many instances in the 80s and 90s when I, as a professional woman, got evaluations like that in doing interviews or whatever. And at that time still, and this is a subject which is more or less settled, at that time, women as victims of rape were in danger of being seen as the seducing or provoking part. We don't have this anymore. If you analyze the genre, that's done this. We have had a discussion about these cases. It was so necessary to have the discussion. But what we have, and this is really disturbing, if you watch TV, criminal series in TV, on Sundays in Germany, we have a very famous series called Tatort, and then we have trial shows. The famous one was Salish. She's retired now, but there's still Judge Holt. And in these series, in many, many cases, the woman is the wrongdoer, the murderer, or the really bad person, even if in the trial shows, even if a man is accused, it suddenly proves, oh no, he was not guilty, but the woman, look what she looks like, this kind of thing. So this is popular culture. And why do we have it that in popular culture, all this is still blown into the minds of people? And in Tatort, you will watch Tatort occasionally too, no. But in Tatort, so often women are murderers, and the percentage, I think 10% of murderer is done by women, so this doesn't fit reality, but it seems to be sexy to present women as evil persons, the true beasts. Important too to have a look, I already mentioned a little of that, of gender in the communication process. We have some notion that maybe women are better communicators. And the question is, do women listen better? If I compare myself to my husband, I would say that's true. Is their style of leading the proceedings and their style of interrogation friendlier, better? There's quite a lot of evidence from that extended research in France, and we have quite a lot of evidence from Israel. I have one colleague called Rainer Bogosh, who is a social linguist, and she sits in court all day and observes proceedings. And in one article she has written, her analysis was that male statements towards female participants in a proceeding were geared towards establishing male power and hierarchical status. This is old stories about difference. Carol Gilligan has described, and which has also been described by Deborah Tannen about communication processes. Deborah Tannen is a linguist, and she has described that when you have three men in a room, immediately the communication will be in the way who's number one and the other numbers. Again, I presented a little, yeah, you understand what I mean. So, wait a minute, I have a note here I wanted to add. We had a very interesting piece of research in Germany about murder cases in the regional court of Saarbrücken. A colleague, Dagmar Oberlies, has analyzed about 150 murder cases which had been dealt with over a period of 6-7 years, I don't remember. That was in the 90s. And she found something very interesting, that when a female prosecutor was involved, the sentence tended to be lower than when a male prosecutor was involved. And when a female defense attorney was there, the sentence was higher than when a male defense attorney was there. Analyzing that, the clue could be that due to the communication process in court, women had more problems to achieve their professional aim. The professional aim for the prosecutor maybe to get a higher sentence, or at least a sentence according to what was accused, and at least for the defense lawyer to get a very low sentence. And this is a somewhat disturbing evidence. What Rainer Bogosh also found, that women judges imitated men and were intended to be as tough in their statements as men, and were not as soft in the Israeli courts towards female parties accused professionals as could have been expected. So I have a list of gender issues in judging current examples. So this recent case was about cuts in alimony for divorced partners, which is disadvantaging mainly women. We've had lots of cases on childcare rights of men and women, lots of cases on rights in same-sex marriages, all these cases where gender issues and stereotyping plays a role. A row of cases on the legal position of transsexual and intersexual persons, then wearing of headscarf or burqa in public, tax benefits for married couples, cuts in social benefits for non-married partners, interpretation of stalking, domestic and sexual violence, and then what I'd already talked about, the asylum or refugee status for women threatened by female genital mutilation. So, the question, women's contribution, do women judge better? Do they make better use of stereotypes? Of course, people need stereotypes. And also the law has to work with stereotypes. You have to find majority images of something. Otherwise you can't, if you want to have everything treated individually, you can't pass laws. But still, and so do women do better in that respect? Do women judges promote substantive justice? And also with that, my colleagues have dealt. One found, an Argentinian colleague, that women in the Argentinian courts tended to use a more interdisciplinary approach, saying or meaning that they had a broader view of everything around, of what happened in society, and not only just this case here to decide. That they avoided the rigid application of universal rules and narrow doctrinal decisions, which of course, in a sense, is softening and maybe weakening the legal field. That they tended to redraw the boundary between the legal and the social. The question, do they reach more balanced decisions? This I can't answer. Do they avoid contentious solutions, rather try to search for win-win solutions? American colleagues had a look at that at family courts and told me we haven't found anything at all, and also in criminal court. You know that in the Anglo-American system you have the adversary system, more fighting in criminal court, but there you have to perform a professional role. But I already mentioned that we have evidence that in some parts of the judicial system decisions are written in more often in a pro-woman fashion by women. So, and I'm getting to the end now. Oh, yes. So, we have a lot of gender included in court cases. In law, yes, these images play a role. And it's so in the gender-coded cases at court, it's so important to take gender aspects into account. But are those actors able to do it? I say, they have difficulties. They have deficits in gender knowledge. We have very few articles about gender aspects in classical legal publications. In Germany, we have a gendered legal literature that's written by women and read by women, classical thing, and in the mainstream legal press, almost no gender issues. In legal education, I've written a gender curriculum for law faculties, and it's on the internet, it's in a book, and one colleague has once asked me about it, and I had no other reaction so far about my wonderful gender curriculum. And in judicial training. There's an obligation for people who do further training for the judiciary that they should include this question, but as they are not trained themselves, of course, they don't do it. So we need train the trainer courses, and it has to be included. But how to create gender awareness? Yeah, this is mainstreaming the subject, and this is such a difficult task. I have devoted a good time of my life on that. And as I have told you, I have done special gender trainings, but gender trainings are very tricky. They're considered like ideological re-education, and so there's a lot of aversion in people if you oblige them to do it. If they can come by themselves, okay. And otherwise, my solution rather is to have gender aspects in any kind of judicial training. But if the trainers are not trained, if I have these trainings, yes, I include it. Yeah. Why is it so important? And I have something very funny at the end about the lasting gender stereotypes. I had written an editorial for our journal for judges and prosecutors in my favorite state. The editor in charge wrote to the colleague who commissioned the article with me, and she passed that email on to me. Herewith the corrections for the editorial, the style of which strikes me as masculine and harsh rather than feminine and gentle. Never mind. Oh, sorry to say, there's still a long way to go, I must confess. I hope I could make clear to you where all things lie and where we can try to deal with these questions. And even if we have won many battles meanwhile, and even if we have achieved many things, there still is quite a lot to do. And if you want to have more information, write me an email. Thank you so much.